Welcome. So, voice still doing okay? Yeah. So we have on my left Hannah Prins, climate activist with Extinction Rebellion and Stop Ecocide, also a writer from the Netherlands. And a personal fact about her, she has 2 cats who she loves very much and has been to jail 15 times for her activism. Okay. On my right, we have Mayada, Adil, young advisor to the United Nations, women's and refugee rights activist, and also, personal fact, a medical doctor and a fashion designer, so a real multi-potentialite. Welcome. And we have Camille, Grenier, just doing a little move there, who's operations director at the Forum for Information and Democracy. And personal fact about him, he has a secret Instagram account where he posts unfinished songs that he writes. Now could be your chance to make the big reveal.
Not this time.
Not this time. Welcome, Camille. Okay, and first question, and we'll start with Mayada. I'd love to know a little about and for the first questions, we'll keep these super sharp, 1.5 minutes or so, your personal journey with democracy or lack of democracy. How has it affected your own journey?
So I'm Sudanese, so definitely lack of democracy. I was born under the dictatorship for almost 30 years. Also, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. No democracy at all. And then I've been living in France for 5 years as a political refugee. So I never know what does it mean to vote and for who to vote. So I become one of the strongest pro-democratic voices for Sudan because I believe that youth led the change in the revolution 2019, that the revolution happened in Sudan that inspired the world. It was led by women, by youth. We organized manifestations, protests. We lobbied for promoting our revolution in the world, in France, in Europe. So we did a lot of work to come to that. And I remember this place, the first event happened, it was the Paris Conference for Sudan 2022 in May, under the President Emmanuel Macron, to support the democratic transition of Sudan. And they brought the Sudanese youth voices up front to talk about this. Yeah, so that's basically it.
That's a really inspiring start. Thank you for sharing. And I think also a reminder that democracy goes beyond just having a vote and really participating. We come to Hannah now. I'd love to know a little more about how your own journey of climate activism has intersected with democracy and again, or lack of it.
Yeah, so I was already quite active in the climate movement in Holland. And then I thought, we keep on writing all these papers and we give it to politicians and then they all just go up right into the bin. And then I thought something needs to change. And then one day when I was going to university, I walked past the big protest of Extinction Rebellion and then I thought, this is interesting. What is civil disobedience? I'd never really heard of it. And then I started to research and then I joined Extinction Rebellion. And in Holland, it has really taken off in the past 4 or 5 years. So it's really become a big movement with also lots of leverage in parliament, which is great. And that, yet again, to show democracy is really more than taking a pen every 4 years and writing something down. It also means going to the streets if you really disagree with something and changing it in that way.
Brilliant. I could not agree more, and we're going to come back to that point. And then Camille, very different perspective and an equally important one around information and democracy. Can you tell us a little more?
Thanks so much. So indeed, I've been building the Forum on Information and Democracy, so that's kind of been my topic for the last 5 years. And it's really about different voices that we have today, like Anna and Mayada, and how they evolve in a space that is now structured by tech companies in a large part, and how we can design some democratic guardrails to ensure that we have a sound public debate, a healthy information space, and that we address some of the harms that we see, would that be hate speech, online harassment, disinformation, misinformation, which are to a large extent some of the biggest threats that we have right now in our democracies, and we need to preserve information integrity if we are to preserve democracy around the world.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And I think these three stories you've just heard paint the picture a little of where we're at. Democracy in decline since 2016, under threat, and with people excluded from the process. So let's get straight to it. How can we fix this? It's the big question. Let's kick off with a big one and start with you, Hannah. How can we reimagine democracy?
So I think we see that democracies are just not fit for the huge problems we are facing today. Like in no country, it's working to really combat the climate crisis, even if there are politicians who are really trying their best. So I think citizens' assemblies would really work, where a group of citizens is chosen to talk about one subject, and they can come up with really good climate policies, for instance, that work for everyone, because that's where it goes wrong all the time. Like in Holland, you have great subsidies if you want to buy a Tesla car, but there's also people who can't insulate their homes. Of course, people won't vote for better climate policy if that's the case. And that's why citizens' assemblies can bring all different kinds of people together to come with climate policy that actually works for everyone.
Awesome. Okay, so we have 1 point. Citizens' assemblies. What would you add to that, Mayada?
I'll take it from someone that comes from the global south, or like from African countries. I think we face a big issue of the militarization in African country, this is the legacy of the colonization. And what we've seen that from the Western leaders, there is some sort of support for those military institutions that threat the democratic movement and changes in Africa. And if I want to be more critical about that, I cannot understand that how Western assume the leadership of the world, and they impose a democratic model that doesn't fit for the African country, because we have a different political context. As I said, we have the colonization. If you assume yourself as the leader of the world, you have to try to fix the issues that been the legacy of this colonization. And not, for instance, not to supply the arms deals that increase and agitate the conflicts in Africa. The climate crisis, of course, it's impacting the global south more in the north. I think it's just that not agnostically imposing the Western models over the African. Leave the African, find their own solution in their own lands with the grassroots solutions.
Thank you for sharing. And love the call for an African model for democracy. And as we shared in our briefing call, there is like a lot of tribal history with interesting and innovative democratic models that are very different from the Western one, right?
Yes. I think there is a good example of Tanzania. They have the first elected president. Her name is Samia Ibrahim, and she's leading this model that Tanzanian-led, African-led. They have a lot of youth in the parliament. She allowed the protest of the opposition parties and support those protesters. And she allowed more freedom of speech in the country. That's in Africa and in Tanzania, and they have their own model for that, away from the, that's a great model to take an example of, yeah.
Thank you. And Camille, okay, bringing the information perspective, how do we fix democracy?
That's a very broad question. If you're asking me personally, I would say that inequalities are one of the main challenges. if you're asking me professionally, I would just say three things, sorry. First, we need free, independent, well-funded journalists and media that can do their work freely, safely, independently from all kinds of powers. Second, we need to address this sort of markets of idea where everything is in direct competition. And today, media or independent voices are in direct competition with all types of content, ranging from state propaganda to lolcats, all the way through recipes or disinformation, hate speech, and so on. So we need to give, again, a comparative advantage to these reliable sources of information. And this then goes to how do we inform ourselves on climate change and all types of things. There is a huge amount of climate disinformation on YouTube, for example. The last thing is, and how to reinvent democracy, is really to build an information ecosystem that is fit for the future and that is fit with the, technology. And we see new technology like generative AI, going in our daily lives, just like this, with no guarantees on how it will impact democracy, but beyond democracy, again, individuals and our basic freedoms.
Yeah, thank you. And you have a big new report out on AI and democracy, right?
Yeah, we just published, there's been a 6-month effort led by a working group on AI as a public good to set some guardrails on AI, but all types of AI, and not only generative AI that has been on the top of the news cycle for more than a year now, but also the AI that decide which kind of content and the way we produce, share, and have access to information today. This is all based on what we call predictive AI, and it will basically decide based on your personal data and what type of content you will be seeing. And all this, we need some pluralism, some basic guardrails. So we got 200 boring policy recommendations out there. I won't bore you with that, which is a pretty hefty report.
Okay, go onto their website and find it. And Hannah, so you spoke in the beginning, and Mayada too, about the important role of protests in actually building democracy. And I know you have a nice example from back in the 70s in Amsterdam. Maybe you could share a little more.
Yeah, so in 1977, 9,000 people a year died in Holland due to crashes between bikes and cars. And then protesters said, this is enough, 9,000 people in such a small country is really a lot. And then, I wish I could show you the picture, but I don't think we have it. Thousands of protesters took their bikes and lay down on the street in the center of Amsterdam because they wanted to build a 5-lane highway through the middle of Amsterdam, and they blocked that. And now we have the safest bike lanes in the world. So it's just one example of how sometimes policymakers have these ideas, like a 5-lane highway in the middle of Amsterdam, and then people who just live there and who, see their family members get into crashes say, ho, 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 this needs to change. We need to move policy. And that's what happened.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And for Mayada, protests in Sudan are now turning into real practical movements to build the future of Sudan, right?
Yeah. Currently, Sudan is in war, and I'm a part of a greater coalition of women advocacy group. We created a think tank. We basically provide technical advocacy and lobbying with a lot of initiatives around the globe. And we're trying to create a manifesto that include women in the political processes to stop the war, to participate in peace building, and to speak about the future of Sudan, led by Sudanese people, led by the young people and women. Of course, we led the manifestation in 2019, but all the political processes for that, women been excluded. And we're trying to do that with the strong lobbies, with the strong voices of those women that works in the grassroots, and they work around the globe.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that perspective of inclusion. And I think I'd love to turn to you two now and talk a little, and Priska also highlighted it. What do you think is the role of youth in building, reimagining democracies here? Maybe start with you.
Start with me? So this is what leaders, business leaders, political leaders like to do. They like to say, oh, you young people, we have our hopes in you. You have to change the world. And then I'm like, no, you have to do it. You are in places of power. You're the CEO of a big company. You're in parliament. You can actually change things. So I would actually like to turn it around. Like, I'm happy to be here, but I would also like to be in a bar with my, well, it's a bit too early for that, but, you know, I think we put way too much pressure on young people instead of saying, no, the people who are in power, those are the people that have to actually make those decisions.
Love it, love that perspective, thank you. Camille, are young people playing a role in your work also?
Couldn't say anything better than that. No, I'm sorry. No, I would. Indeed, I don't think you need to have a distinction between young and old. And you know, sometimes when, again, on my field on information and disinformation, there is a whole things and millions born in media literacy programs. And this always goes to the young people. But when you look at the studies, the people or the age range that is sharing the most disinformation and fake news, it's 70 and beyond. There's a study by the New York University, and it's really, you know, we all have an aunt or a nanny that is spreading, oh, have you seen this? It's on Facebook, it's true. It must be true, it's on Facebook. So I think, you know, we really have to have this, this dialogue between generations on the information space, because young people, I feel, know how to navigate this space, and they already know that, you know, you need to make the distinction between what you see on Snapchat and what you see on some channels in YouTube.
Awesome, thank you so much for that. And then coming from about youth, who are, of course, the most affected group for many of the issues that we have coming in the future, and maybe the defining nexus or intersection of our time is democracy and climate. Sudan, one of the most affected countries by the climate crisis as well. How are you seeing that climate democracy link?
I mean, one of the strongest driver for what happened in Darfur, it's the food insecurity and the climate crisis. And that's why it's increased the conflict. It never ended cycle of conflicts. And now we have the water resources war coming up around the Nile. And we acknowledge that, but we don't have still the infrastructure to build the democratic processes. We need to stop the war first. I have to compliment what you just said about the leaders are not, they just excuse themselves, and I think they just find excuses. They know everything, and I don't feel like they have the political will to change that. I believe our generation, it's a native technology. We're not the future leader. We are already leaders now. And I believe we have the vision. Maybe we don't have the accumulated experiences that they already have, but we have the vision, we have the knowledge, we have the will to change that. And we taken that from the streets, with the people of the lands, we're making this change. And I believe it's just a matter of time that we do this intergenerational dialogue to bring more change and to work for the best for it.
Thank you for that. Getting lots of spontaneous applauses for this. This is a good sign. And we've seen this theme a lot around Change Now. I think this intergenerational justice, intergenerational dialogue. Hannah, coming to you as our timer goes to red. We spoke a lot in our preparation about a just transition in the climate crisis and about democracy's part in that, the farmer protests, etc. Can you speak a little about that and the importance of that?
Yeah, so here in the West, we're worrying about, can we still go skiing in the winter? Well, other people in other parts of the world, they're literally becoming inhabitable already. That's already happening right now. And that is something we need to address, and we need to focus on way more. So we need to work on inequality within countries, but also between countries. So within countries, I think we've seen many farmers' protests, also in my own country, who are using lots of violence. So no, their right to protest is not protected because they use so much violence. But those farmers are angry, and they're rightfully so angry, you know. The bank said, intensify, intensify, take in more cows, take in more cows, take in more loans. And now they're seeing, hey, that's actually not working. So a just transition means that we, like I like to say, we need way more farmers, but we need way less cows. We need a transition that actually works for everyone, because otherwise people go to the streets in yellow vests. That's not crazy if the transition is not a fair transition.
Yeah, awesome point. Thank you so much for bringing that. And that brings us kind of to a point of action. And what we all, as individuals, what can we do to build better democracies? And I'd love to have a closing round now for each of you, starting with you, Camille. What's your call to action for the people watching today, both in general, and how can they support your work at the forum?
That's a very good question. No, I think on the information space and on my work specifically, it's just we need to raise awareness on that. And as there's been some Extinction Rebellion and some movements for climate change, I hope that one day we'll see a movement for a better information space and a healthier information space. Demonstration to fight against hate speech online, that would be tremendous. And then what you can do, well, of course, as a lot of people around here, I guess, if you have €1 million, please send it our ways. Other than that, just raise awareness, share part of the content. The problem with me is that it's very technical and it's maybe not for everybody. But raise awareness and have this discussion on the public debate and on the ethics of discussion.
Awesome, thank you so much. Where can they find more information about this?
informationdemocracy.org.
Nice, thank you. Mayada, what's your call to action and how can people support your work?
I would say a threat of democracy in the north impact the democracy in the south. What happened in the north, it affects the south, and what happened in the south, it affects the north. My call for action, we know there is an European election is coming up, and I would really ask you, all of you, because you have the right to vote, to be very considerate and very responsible, and do not take your voting right for granted, because think of the other conflict in the world. Think of the climate crisis that's impacting the global south. Think of everything, not only in your comfort, not only in Europe, in the other part of the world. When you do that, I think we can build something together and collaborative initiative to improve the life of each other in this planet. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayada. Hannah, you have the last word.
So there's this one research that shows if 3.5% of a population goes to the streets, boycotts, writes petitions, like engages in something and stands up for something, then a revolution has never failed. So 3.5% is not even that much. So I'm not asking you for millions, I'm just asking you to engage, boycott, protest, glue yourself to the streets. This crisis is so big that things like that really need to happen. The time for just talking is done. And vote. Democracy is not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for really sharp contributions and for very inspiring calls to action. Thank you, everyone, for watching.